joining us today. So perhaps to start off, you could tell us a little bit about Coke as well as what you do.
Uh, Koch Engineered Solutions, we are a subsidiary of Koch Industries, Inc., one of the largest private companies in the world with around revenue of 125 billion annually. Koch owns a very diverse group of businesses involving industrial manufacturing, engineered technology, agriculture, glass refining, renewable energy, chemicals and polymers, pulp and paper, electronics, project services, a pretty long list. We were founded in 1945. In fact, KES is actually the first business that our founder, Fred Koch, started. So we've had about 80 over years of history. We deliver innovative solutions. We provide uniquely engineered solutions in construction, mass and heat transfer, combustion and emissions control, filtration, separation, materials application, automation and actuation. KES actually has about 56 global offices and about 19 manufacturing facilities, around 9,000 employees and contractors. We deliver superior value in developing, integrating, and applying innovative technical and service solutions for the industrial value chain. For me personally, I lead Koch Engineered Solutions, the engineering, the technology and services group. So we focus more on the combustion, mass transfer, heat exchangers, and the related equipment, technology and services sector. This is a very exciting sector, given that with emissions, green energy, renewables, carbon capture coming up in the next several years.
Right. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about, say, the day in a life of what does the typical day in your role look like? And, what are some of the pros and cons of your role?
We always want to consider ourselves as being a global company, and yet we are local. My day can start, around working on areas from development, commercial, operations, customers matters. We also communicate with our European and US counterpart, and bearing in mind the time zone differences, the world is evolving into renewables, green energy and lower emission, and convincing our long-time customers to start now. There is always a cost to invest now or to reap the returns in the future. And at the same time, customers must be willing to change. This is going to be a new constant as we evolve. Being early adopters will demonstrate to the communities the intent to be a reference point or to send the positive message around the world on going green. So, these are the kind of challenges that maybe, for us and our colleagues, we'll continue to face it in the next several years.
All right. And, in this what happens next scenario as well, I understand that KES has some innovations that might be the answer to this question. Could you tell us a little bit about this?
Innovation may be a pretty strong word in this sense. What we would like to say is, we'll say it in a different manner, but we are probably pretty unique. We start from the project development phase to the sourcing of equipment, as well as for the installation and the completion, and so on and so forth. We think that we are probably one of the very few companies that do that. Most of the companies which you may have interviewed, they probably will be handling certain equipment or certain products to reduce carbon emission. For us, we have a spectrum of products from mass transfer to heat exchangers to technology. And at the same time, we are also an EPC, depending on the region we operate in. So I don't think there's one organization can do all this. I think we are unique. Once we have our technology, we will continue to innovate and find new ways to offer better solutions for customers.
Right. So as I understand it, KES offers a more varied range of products and solutions as compared to other companies. What do you think helps in putting KES in the position to be able to make this kind of offering that sets it apart from other companies?
We are also working with licensors. So as you may know, today there are probably about 5 or more various kind of technology that the licensors can offer. We are flexible in relation to the customer's needs and requirements. So if they prefer one technology over the other, we would be able to work with them based on their requirements and combining it with our equipment and our other services. Some other vendors may just market, one type of approach. Whereas for us, we are what we call as technology agnostic. Basically, we are independent of the technology. This will enable the customer to make the right decision based on their own requirements, such as capital expenditure, operating expenditure, the size of their plants, and how, let's say, if we are in a discussion about carbon capture, how are they going to store their carbon dioxide and so on and so forth. Yeah. So, with this, I think basically we are very open to customers' needs and requirements.
Right. Okay. And let's take a look at the industry as a whole. So given the COVID-19 pandemic, the downstream oil and gas industry has had to navigate quite a lot. And, in going through this post-pandemic era, what do you think operators should prioritize in order to survive and thrive?
I think we all know that COVID-19 has forced the players to rethink their future and the future of their industry as well. Demand growth has slowed. There is a growing surplus, and then a shrinking value pool were already present before the pandemic and have only become more pronounced. The industry also faced structural disruption from the transition to renewable energy resources. All this impact was irregular across value chains, with perhaps automotive and construction applications seeing more declines, more steep declines. Packaging demand, especially in food, sanitary products, and medical applications, they remain robust. Compared to oil and gas players, the supply side has been less affected. Now, what we think is operators perhaps could focus on 2 activities to ensure survival and maybe thrive better. Number 1 is raising the capital productivity. With overcapacity and lower operational cash flows until 2025, companies can revisit their capital investment pipelines. And number 2 is to scale the digital and analytics in the commercial and operations front. For example, end-to-end digital transformation can lead to margin improvements for chemical companies. Petrochemical players should maximize margins, perhaps by using advanced analytics to reduce procurement costs, lower the energy consumption, improving use and throughput, and optimize product pricing in a very dynamic business environment. All this represents challenges to them, but this is where we think a couple of ways that they can look at it.
Right. So the big question is, when it comes to the future of the oil and gas, as you rightly put it, what happens next? What comes next? And, we see that, say, sustainability is becoming a very big corporate CSR and ESG concern. So how can organizations adapt to stakeholder sustainability demands?
One way is looking at action plan to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions across the industry. Oil and gas companies have the same incentives to reduce Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions from the operations, and companies in other energy-intensive industries, they also face increasing pressure to address Scope 3 emissions from the products. The changing regulations and expectations from the society around clean energy make it difficult to determine which assets across the production process that they should adopt new technology to decarbonize and which should be left behind. So that's one action. The other one that we can think of is operations excellence, increasing the operational efficiency and safety while reducing waste and emissions. The manufacturing challenges today aren't just about improving performance or practicing environmental stewardship. Examples such as managing water and waste, reducing carbon emissions, and increasing energy efficiency. With all this, awareness around, going green, reduction in emission, and so on, I think it's good that industries like this should start looking at it now, and using examples from the Western world. The United States, Canada, some European countries, they are already starting. Asia is maybe a few years behind, but we think, this region is catching up fast.
Right. But what are some of the challenges that you feel this region might face in terms of catching up to, say, more Western case studies and examples to follow? Because, for example, we have to look at things like geographical location or even the current workforce that's in effect.
Okay. This is based on our experiences with customers. I think for Asia, basically, since we are behind, by perhaps a few years, to make the start. Looking from an overall perspective, starting now or starting in 2030, which I'm sure you are aware, some countries in Asia Pacific already started the plan for a partial emissions reduction, or 2050, which most countries in Asia are targeting that date for a full carbon neutral kind of targets. That's number one, starting now or starting later. The other one is the high capital expenditure. Is the returns justifiable? Because going into such a project is going to take millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars. Not every organization can do it. Some governments in Asia, they give subsidy, tax incentives, and partial financing. This will help companies to reduce some of their expenditure. And then the other issue is the logistic for carbon capture, as an example. How do we store the carbon? Not every country in Asia Pacific would have the space to be able to store those. The other one is, what if we don't do anything now? So our answer to customers can be in the sense that, do you want to pay the carbon tax eventually, because you still need to spend the money? So it's a matter of whether we spend the money in the project or paying the emissions tax. The other question is always, what is the best way to start? Now, I mentioned about what happens next or earlier on. Whether we go for a partial reduction, being carbon neutral like right now, is always a challenge, because everything comes at a cost. To overcome this, what we think is for companies to start thinking ahead now, start early, be the early adopters. Like I mentioned earlier, early adopters, for most countries in Asia, they'll likely get subsidy or tax breaks. This varies between countries. The other area is to start thinking about funding. The other part which I'm sure companies are starting to look at is to consider integrating the sustainability into their own strategies and decision-making framework. So start with a plan now. Another way to look at it is combining, having that offensive penetration, such as when you enter new markets, looking at funding for R&D, and then participating in innovation and ecosystems. Start looking at it from an offensive side, and then from a defense standpoint, maybe divesting business and retrofitting high emissions assets to lower their emission. So again, my last comment goes into a partial emissions reduction, which may actually, go some ways towards a full-blown project in the future.
All right. So I do have a question about the increased sustainability of the industry in itself. Some of the feedback that we hear from some refiners and operators is, well, that the oil and gas industry looks increasingly less like the oil and gas industry. So what is your opinion about that?
I think the industry is evolving. If those who are in the oil and gas industry, they are assuming that, hey, 5 to 10 years or 15 years from now, things are going to be the same. It may not be. Let me give you an example of refinery business. I know it's more upstream, but with oil perhaps becoming less and less of a commodity like 20, 30 years ago, or even today, companies need to change. I'll use a different example. We have a refining business in the US. They are already starting to think about what will happen 10, 15, 20 years from now. For example, solar energy is an alternative. Trying to run the operations more efficiently. So for the oil and gas industry, in running their operations, they may need to pivot towards going green themselves. Not an easy task. Koch Industries, our organization, year after year, we have been looking at effort to reduce our emissions. And this is actually in our website, which customers can actually go in and see it, because we have a corporate social responsibility to actually make sure that we go green together with the rest. So if we are not doing it, what more do the customers need to do?
All right. So in the spirit of going green, sustainability and the energy transition are overarching themes at this year's Asian Downstream Summit happening in Singapore. So what can we look forward to from Koch at the conference and event this year?
With our domain expertise and the vast experience in the industry, KES will customize our combination of capabilities to deliver reliable, proven, integrated technologies and services. Our connected companies create environmental solutions that can help partners achieve decarbonization faster and thrive. Our stewardship solutions include carbon capture and reduction, reliability and energy efficiency, emissions reduction, as well as renewable energy and managing water and waste. This year's Asian Downstream Summit, our experts will introduce carbon capture project success rates, success cases, and how our combustion expertise could reduce tail gas incinerators emissions, and our digital connected platform to improve heater performance. We have a booth, so we welcome all participants to visit our booth to explore more. Like I mentioned earlier as well, carbon capture is such a huge subject, I think, this year, and I'm sure the next several years. So we welcome the participants to talk to us. We are more than happy to share our experience. And in terms of references, there is one comment that I need to make, in the sense that in Asia Pacific, most customers will ask for references. And we are more than happy to share the references as and when they are available. And no doubt, the references now comes from the West, simply because the West are ahead. So, our advice is look at what we have done with our references. By the time the Asia market is working on carbon capture, all these solutions would have been tried and trusted and proven to work. So again, a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, the impact would be felt, in the sense that these are the solutions which the market would have accepted, and it's working.
All right, thank you very much for sharing that with us. And we certainly look forward to seeing KES this October at the Asian Downstream Summit.
Thank you. Pleasure.